And do you intend to potentially put U.S. troops or more troops in the region?
No, I'm not putting troops anywhere. If I were, I certainly wouldn't tell you.
President Trump questioned on whether American troops would be deployed into Iran while speaking next to Japan's prime minister moments ago. And just breaking in the Middle East, CENTCOM says an American F-35 jet made an emergency landing at a regional airbase after flying a combat mission in Iran. The aircraft landed safely. The pilot said to be in stable condition. Well, I'm John Roberts in Washington. Busy Thursday afternoon already, Sandra. It's only an hour old.
All right, let's kick things off. I'm Sandra Smith in New York. Good to be with you, John. This is America Report. So CENTCOM releasing this new video today showing U.S. forces taking out Iranian naval assets. It says threatens shipping near the Strait of Hormuz. The president taking NATO and U.S. allies to task earlier this week for not helping keep that strait open. And here was President Trump on that moments ago.
In the case of NATO, they don't want to help us defend the strait, and they're the ones that need it. But now they're getting much nicer because they're seeing my attitude. They're getting much nicer.
All right, let's get straight to our chief foreign correspondent, Trey Yingst. He's reporting live from Tel Aviv at this hour. Hello, Trey.
Sandra, good afternoon. We start with some breaking news. This evening in Israel, an Iranian ballistic missile targeted the northern city of Haifa, and shrapnel from that missile hit the Bazan oil refinery. This is Israel's largest refinery, and it accounts for more than 50% of the country's gasoline and diesel supplies. You can see some black smoke here in the aftermath of that shrapnel impact, and it comes amid a renewed focus on energy infrastructure across the Middle East after Israeli airstrikes targeted Iran's South Pars gas field yesterday. This immediately drew a response from the Iranian regime, who went after more Gulf oil facilities and gas fields, targeting Qatar's Ras Laffan facility. And the Qataris say that 17% of their liquefied natural gas output has been reduced. As a result of this attack, it could take up to 5 years, according to reports, to repair the damage caused in that Iranian strike. Now, President Trump overnight took to Truth Social about the initial Israeli strikes, saying in part, quote, Israel, out of anger for what has taken place in the Middle East, has violently lashed out at a major facility known as South Pars gas field in Iran. The Israelis rejected that characterization, but the president today was asked about it in the Oval Office, saying this.
You talked to Prime Minister Netanyahu about attacking the oil and gas fields.
Yeah, I did. I told him don't do that, and he won't do that. We didn't discuss. You know, we do. We're independent. We get along great. It's coordinated, but on occasion he'll do something, and if I don't like it, and so we're not doing that anymore.
The Israelis and their U.S. counterparts are continuing to strike Iranian naval assets. This is the Caspian Sea, just north of Iran, where overnight Israeli fighter jets targeted a variety of Navy vessels belonging to the Iranian regime. This is a concerted effort by the Americans and the Israelis to go after what is left of the Iranian Navy and other IRGC targets. Here in Israel, Sandra, there is an understanding there will be more Iranian ballistic missile fire tonight. Since midnight, there have been 10 different missile barrages that targeted this country. Sandra?
All right, Trey Yingst there in Tel Aviv for us. Trey, thank you very much. John?
All right, Sandra, let's bring in retired Air Force Lieutenant General Mark Weatherington. He has flown the B-2 bomber and has more than 2,000 flying hours, including combat, over Afghanistan. General, great of you to be with us this afternoon. I want to start with the Straits of Hormuz because that really is an area of concern for literally everybody who puts gas in their tank or heats their home. And there appears to be a big change of heart from Britain, France, Germany, Holland, Italy, and Japan, who put out this statement a short time ago. We express our readiness to contribute to appropriate efforts to ensure safe passage through the strait. We welcome the commitment of nations who are engaging in preparatory planning. President Trump would seem twisted some arms and twisted them successfully.
Well, John, thanks for having me. And I think, we all recognize the importance of the Straits of Hormuz for our allies and partners around the world and others. And economic stability and the strength that we derive from that free exchange through that passageway is very important. And I know we have been focused militarily on eliminating Iranian capabilities in that region. We've seen a concerted effort to go after the coastal defense cruise missiles, some of the fast boats and other capabilities they have to influence the straits. But it's always great to have allies and partners who are willing to support those efforts.
We see petroleum facilities, natural gas facilities being targeted in places like Qatar. Israel appeared to have set off that escalation by attacking the Pars natural gas field in Iran. As you heard the president a moment ago, he said he told Bibi Netanyahu to cut that out, don't do it. But the president himself threatened that if Iran were to further attack oil facilities or other petroleum facilities in the Gulf region, that he would have no hesitation to all out destroy the Pars field in Iran. I'm sure he doesn't want to do that because of what it would do to energy prices, but I've not known him to make a hollow threat.
Well, John, I think there's been several surprises so far in the conflict that we've seen, and one of them has been the Iranian efforts to attack their Gulf neighbors, particularly civilian targets, hotels, infrastructure, some energy infrastructure as well, and that certainly I think was a surprise. I think we will all be watching very diligently to see if this expands and what that impact might be to broader markets and to oil supply around the globe should this escalation continue.
Former Ambassador Richard Haass, who also used to head up the Council on Foreign Relations, had an idea that people may find interesting. He said the United States, ideally with the political and military support of allies in the region, Europe and Asia, which would likely be forthcoming given the extent of their energy insecurity, should consider adopting a policy toward the Strait of Hormuz that could be summarized as, quote, open for all or closed to all. Under such a policy, the United States and its partners would announce that no tanker from Iran would be permitted to reach its destination in another country until Iran backed off on its threats to and attacks on commercial vessels transiting the strait. I mean, right now, people who are clients of Iranian tankers, they're making it through the strait. Yet Iran has apparently got the power to be able to say nobody else gets through. Should the U.S. declare this policy of open to all or closed to all?
John, I think that's going to be a tough decision for the administration to have to make. But I would tell you this. It's clear that right now the United States and Israel have almost complete control of the air in a manner that they can attack in this area. They can have overwatch and intelligence and surveillance and react very quickly to what Iran might be doing. And as I said earlier, they're working very hard to attrit those capabilities to influence the Strait of Hormuz and the Persian Gulf. I think we can impose some serious costs and continue to try to enforce some security in that region. But it's going to be very tough to eliminate all of that capability and prevent Iran from doing anything in that region.
So there was a moment in the Oval Office in the meeting between President Trump and the Japanese Prime Minister Takeichi that, no surprise, has gone viral, where he was asked by a Japanese reporter why the president didn't alert his allies that he was going to attack Iran. Listen to this.
Why didn't you tell U.S. allies in Europe and Asia, like Japan, about the war before attacking Iran? So we are very confused about we Japanese citizens.
Well, one thing, you don't want to signal too much. You know, when we go in, we went in very hard, and we didn't tell anybody about it because we wanted surprise. Who knows better about surprise than Japan? Okay? Why didn't you tell me about Pearl Harbor?
Oh, my goodness. The Japanese Prime Minister's eyes and face kind of said it all. What did you think of that exchange?
Well, interesting exchange. I think the key point here is that the president has the prerogative to either inform allies ahead of time and gain their support for the efforts that are ongoing, or inform them later in the process. I think in this case, the importance of surprise, the importance of the initiative, the importance of initiating this effort without a possible leak or some other effect taking place was important enough to keep that from the allies at the time.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to go back to your World War II references, Pearl Harbor versus Midway shows, the element of surprise could be a two-way street. General, thanks for being with us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Want even more Fox News on YouTube? Become a Fox News Patriot today. Click join to find out how.